Hello. Alright, so this is going to be a very simple video about porn space, well, the space and role of porn, or, well, erotica in fandom spaces, right? You hear all of these different opinions on porn. You see these people who are like, oh, well, it's not really necessary, or the people that are like, oh my gosh, I don't read anything else. But the one thing that we forget is that as people who are partaking in fandom, we're partaking in media, in a set of media that usually goes by the mantra, sex sells. So of course, when we decide that we're going to write, en masse, like the collective we, decide that we're going to write or draw or create something for a fandom, it's gonna be porn because sex is something that's really interesting, even if you're not having it. Or if you're never gonna have it, even if you go, I am going to never have sex, you're going to a lot of people that are writing porn that find a lot of comfort in writing porn are people who aren't doing it. And not because they can't get any, they don't want to. I think that porn is very important in porn spaces, and no, I'm not biased because I really like writing porn, but because seeing other people writing and drawing, like, okay, regular pornography, three-dimensional human beings breathing pornography, is good on a scale because you're looking at actual bodies and you're going, these are people and they're doing things that I'm into, right? But then it hits you that, oh, well, not really, because they're being paid, and sometimes these people don't enjoy what they're doing. It's for a paycheck, it's a job. When you go to, fandom and you're reading or looking at fan art or fan fiction that's erotic in nature, you're seeing the inner workings of these people's minds. You're going, oh, whoa, this kink, this thing that I have never been able to express my positive feelings toward, here it is. Here it is, and I'm not the only one. You get a really big sense of I'm not the only one when it comes to porn and fandom, because most people love fluff. They love baby stories or happy families doing things stories. They like angst, especially canon compliant angst. I'm looking at you, comics fandom. Everybody dies, painfully. But with porn, you have I guess, like, layers, like, 9 layers of hell. You have, like, all of these different interesting ways that porn can come out, and it describes different sexual practices that actual people do. It's totally cool sometimes, and you have, good or bad. I mean, there are really bad stories out there that are supposed to be erotic, but the important thing with fandom is that you can look at somebody who is interested, like daddy kink, right? If you just ignore it and you just go, oh man, well, mainstream porn doesn't have this for me. You look at different books and you try to find that. You're not going to find it, but you go to fandom and you're like, there's a fandom space for that. And I think it's actually really important that you can find all of these different things. Whether or not you agree with the sexual practices in the pornography is that's for a different video. And nobody asked me about that, so you're not getting that. But for me personally, I started with erotic fan fiction when I was all of 11 years old. I was precocious. I read a lot. I learned to read by age 4. So by age 8, I was reading novels, right? I didn't actually realize, though, that sex happened in novels for the longest time. But I figured out fan fiction when I moved to Florida, and I would read fan fiction for Devil Hunter Yoko. I've never seen that anime, like, at all. I have no idea what it's about. None. But I used to read fan fiction for it, and I loved it. And at the same time, Adult Swim was starting. So that was in 2001. So Adult Swim was starting. So I was like, oh my gosh, so Yu Yu Hakusho, Cowboy Bebop. What else? I think we had the awkward Sailor Moon Dragon Ball porn fanfiction thing. Like, I think we all had that phase. If we were born in the 90s, like late 80s, early 90s, we all had that phase because those sites were free back then, I hope, because otherwise, wow. But yeah, so from a relatively early, time, I was like looking at these stories and going, oh, cool. So from a relatively young age, I knew that I did not want any of that for myself, but that, wow, this shit is cool. Like, this is stuff that actual people do. And I was able to use fandom and the sex in these fanfiction stories and go, oh wow, this is cool. And I started writing like really shitty fanfiction. Like, it was so bad. Everybody got pregnant. Like, I didn't understand pregnancy until like maybe I was 14. So wow, sheltered, super sheltered child. So like everybody got pregnant, and the pregnancies only lasted like a week, and then they all had beautiful babies, and they had more sex. And like, what's so weird is that for the longest time though, like, I'm getting all of these facts about sex and sexuality wrong. I had a copy of, I think, Our Bodies, Ourselves from the 70s. I had a copy of that someone gave to me, and I apparently didn't read past the parts on masturbation. So I knew how to write that. That was it. But yeah, so getting all of this, so that was how I started. I started writing, and I with fandoms I didn't know, and then I got into Fruits Basket and Gundam. Oh, those were good spaces. Like, I mean, for porn. Other things, no. But for figuring out things, sexual things, they were really good. Like, I got a lot of literary romance stuff from those stories. I think fan fiction helps you figure out if you're into fandom, right? And especially if you don't live or surround yourself with people who are sexually active or who have lots of books. Fandom and fan fiction help, because I mean, you shouldn't take the sex that you read in fan fiction as like, how it's gonna be. A lot of times it's just like romance novels. It's hyped up, it's romanticized. You never see the after anal sex moments in stories or porn. Like, I mean, you don't see it, but they exist. That's something that real people have to deal with, but they help. It's like they're the bridge to that part. In some cases, like, I mean, all cases are not the same, especially with fan fiction, because everybody does fandom differently, right? And there's only a few ways I would go, oh, this is doing it wrong. And that's usually when it involves being mean to people, needlessly mean. But anyway, back to the porn. Well, I carried on writing shitty porn until I'm still writing shitty porn. Who are we kidding? Really? But I carried on writing, little bits of porn for Harry and Draco. I started a lot of femme/, like, I had lady ships coming out of my ears. I was all about the ladies. And I made friends, mostly in real life. So I would write stories, and they were most original stories. And there's also freedom in writing original stories, because and different kinks, right? And we'll talk about fandom and kinkiness when we get to, I guess, this stage of my life. And that, I don't even know what this video is supposed to be anymore. I'm so sorry. But yes, I wrote original stories, and because I wasn't writing for a fandom, I was writing for myself, I didn't feel as though I owed anything to anyone. I would write all of these really different and kinky things that I probably wouldn't like in real life, but that my brain really did like. And allowing my brain to go and explore and put down on paper, things that, I would be physically uncomfortable with. I mean, I'm uncomfortable with touch, so that's just me. I don't like being touched. But being able to go, oh, hey, I want to write about bondage and pet play, stuff like that, and then I could think it and then do it, It also gave me excuses to look these things up, because I mean, even though my mother knows that I write these sort of things, right, she's still uncomfortable with it, but going, oh, I'm Googling pet play because I'm interested in the actual practice for myself, versus, oh, I'm Googling this thing because I want to write about it. I saw it on National Geographic Channel, One is more parentally palatable. And it's the lie, sort of. The sort of lie, Okay, so I guess this is where we're talking about kinks. So I am a passively kinky person. Right? Part of not liking to be touched means that I don't really get to do kink stuff. I live with a very awesome kinkster, so she is my go-to for kinky things. Like, I can go to her and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, help me. When I got my flogger, which, hold on, that thing by the door. When I got my flogger, she actually tested it, well, her boyfriend did, on her back. So I could get the sound right, the thwack when it hits the back, the upper back, that sound. I like the idea of exploration, And I think a lot of people who get into fandom who go, oh man, look at all this porn. And they're like, whoa, what do I do with this? It's like, wow, all of a sudden, we live in a society, a very shame-focused and shame-driven society. We have this whole issue where, oh, everything's sexualized. You see breasts everywhere, right? But, Lord forbid, you pop one out and you're not going to use it, to titillate, right? And then you go in fandom, which fandoms overall are not these shining bastions of kink and porn-friendly places. I've been kink-shamed, porn-shamed. I've had subtle shade thrown my way about the porn that I'm writing. Your kink is not going to be everyone's kink. And everyone's kink is not going to be your kink. And that's something you have to remember, because otherwise fandom is not going to be very fun. Just make sure, if you have them, go, hey, tag your stuff, please. That's the best thing to do. Ask for tags, and if the person doesn't tag their stuff, then they probably aren't the kind of person that, you should read. Sorry, that was a little mean. Anyway, finding out that I could go online and that I could write things. I could think about different types of kinks and different porn scenarios, and I could write them, without someone going, oh, this is not how this works. It was really freeing for me. And I think that the role of porn in fandom, one of the roles, is that it helps people. It really helps people figure out what they like if you are in a fandom. I mean, honestly, if you're not in fandom, I have no idea how you're going to figure out your kink, your interest in kink. I don't actually know that many people who weren't into kinks. So I think, well, it helps, right? When I was trying to figure out, because I've had issues with kink and porn because of these people who don't like it, and there's nothing wrong with not liking porn, because there's nothing wrong with not liking sex. It's not something you're into. I personally feel that if you don't like something, and it's a behavior that you can't change in people, right? Like, it will just stress you out. I tell myself that all the time, right? So thinking about pornography and thinking about, how much you hate it, I worry, or not worry, I start to think too much about it. I tell myself, oh, well, I'm doing something wrong by writing all of this. But the whole thing with these fandom spaces is that we are free to write these things, you know? And oh Lord, I'm rambling. I'm so sorry. But I feel as though by being part of fandom spaces and by talking with other people and forming bonds based on kink, you know, like I know it's so weird, but by forming bonds based on these sorts of things, that we're getting this experience where we can go, like we're more sexually open, not really, but enough, right? That we can sit there and talk, go, oh, hey, porn, and have serious conversations. I mean, we don't get to do that in normal everyday society. We really don't. When sexuality is talked about, it's tied into the shame. Fandom, for the most part, allows people to talk about their kinks. There are people who will kink shame or porn shame, and they'll get away with it because that's the kind of thing people try to ignore because they're so used to being told, oh, you like porn, you know, are you sure? They're so used to it that they just hum and let it go back to what things used to be. The point of this whole thing was that we would be getting, like, I would be doing a serious video about porn and the role of it. I think that from my experience with it has been really positive in terms of my growth as a person. And I think that for a lot of people, having the space to talk about it, you know, it's really helpful. I do think that anyone who goes, ew, there's so much porn, really should just breathe. I'm not saying calm down. Breathe first. Because I remember somewhere, I think I was sitting with Angie and we were talking. We saw someone porn shaming last semester, like really recently. They were like super complaining. Sorry that I just rammed my arm in front of the monitor. But they were like complaining heavily about porn in fandom. They're like, why does everything have to be shippy? Why can anything just be, you know, genfic? And they were like about to lay a history lesson down on people. Like, oh, fan fiction isn't like that. Number one, go all the way back. I guess, you know, most of the works that we deal with as classics are derivative works, and the original works were not as sexy as the classics, like, at all. You know, Shakespeare's plays were pretty damn sexy. That counts. That counts as a form of the fanish. You know, though even when you go into official fan stuff, like Spock and Kirk, right? We've found, like, porn, like, from the beginning of official labeled fandoms. We've had porn. We've had serious pornography going on, you know, and mailing lists, you know, at conventions, you people talk about it, they sell it. It's erotica and pornography in fan fiction are not at all new, you know, and they're not something that everyone has to like, because I know quite a few people that cannot read porn. You know, it flicks their switch firmly to off, and that is their body, their mind. They are totally, you are always allowed to dislike things, always, especially if they make you uncomfortable. You know, I think though that people complain, like I've heard people go, oh, well, writing porn is easy. It's not. Pro tip, it is really not. You know, you have to make sure it's arousing for someone, that it's realistic. That the characters, if you are writing fan fiction are in character to a recognizable degree, you know, and that if they aren't, you have to mentally shore yourself up to take the the general bullshit that you get when things aren't 100% in character. You know, there's a lot that goes into porn. There's actually a lot of research, especially if you're writing about someone who has different emotional reactions to sex, different physical characteristics than you do, different sex, a different gender, that sort of thing. Because the way you get good at something is by researching and then by writing a lot of it, and porn is no different. You know, that I just think it's so important. I just really like porn. I like the space that it has in fandom. I like that I can talk. Porn in fandom spaces has made it okay for me to go over to my roommate and go, oh, hey, I'm gonna write a story called Tongue in Cheek and people's gonna be getting rimmed, and she's gonna be like, oh my gosh, who? Or suggest people, you know? Like, it does open paths in fandom spaces. I mean, I don't know about for everyone, like how this works for everyone, but for me, porn has been a pretty good, well, lubricant. And on that, I will end this video because I've made a really awful joke. All right, bye.